Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump has just scored yet another massive win in the U.S. Supreme Court. And so, folks, with today's video, what I want to do is share something with all of you that the left-wing media absolutely does not want you to know. Now, as you're all well aware, the progressive left has been trying to wage lawfare against President Trump ever since he got back into the White House. In fact, in just the last 6 months alone, President Trump has had to fight his way through more federal injunctions than 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama, and 4 years of Biden combined. Now, luckily, just a couple of weeks ago, the Supreme Court effectively shut down all of these nationally sweeping universal injunctions coming out of the radically progressive federal judiciary, which has pretty much stopped all of the progressive left's lawfare dead in its tracks. However, with that being said, many of the federal rulings that they pushed through before the Supreme Court got involved and said, hey guys, enough is enough, those rulings still had to be looked at by the Supreme Court. I know, it's all a colossal waste of taxpayer time and money, but hey, that's what the progressive left does best. But so folks, this is where we get to today's bombshell news. You see, as I mentioned earlier, President Trump has just scored yet another massive victory in the Supreme Court, this one relating to his ability to lay off certain categories of federal workers. But ladies and gentlemen, here's what's so crazy about this. This Supreme Court victory is actually President Trump's 16th consecutive victory in the Supreme Court. To be very clear, in the last 4 months since early April, all President Trump has done in the Supreme Court is win. He hasn't lost a single Supreme Court case in 4 months. And so, folks, just in case there was any doubt whatsoever about whether or not the Democrats, the deep state, and the far-left radical progressives were deliberately weaponizing the legal system in order to sabotage President Trump's America First agenda, look no further. Now we have the proof. Over the last 4 months, the Supreme Court has intervened 16 times in a row to say, you guys are egregiously overstepping your legal boundaries. President Trump is the president. You guys need to let him exercise his constitutionally granted executive authority. But now, to give you guys a better idea of just how insane and subversive the radically progressive federal courts have really been, what do you say we take a closer look at some of President Trump's recent Supreme Court victories? They had to get directly involved and say that President Trump does, in fact, have the authority to lay off federal workers, to overhaul the Department of Education, to deport illegal aliens, to get rid of all of the racist anti-white DEI initiatives, to invoke the Alien Enemies Act, and to cut back on foreign aid spending. And now, folks, I know that's a lot, but you want to know the craziest part about all of these rulings? In almost every single one of President Trump's recent 16 consecutive victories in the Supreme Court, these 3 justices voted against him almost every single time. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, Justice Elena Kagan, and of course, everyone's favorite low IQ DEI hire, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Every single time without fail, all 3 of them chose to play partisan politics rather than properly interpret the U.S. Constitution. Hell, I don't even know if these 3 have even read the U.S. Constitution. But now, folks, there's something else I want you all to take a look at here, but first, I do want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, take a look at this. As it would turn out, all of this lawfare against President Trump was actually all part of an incredibly orchestrated, premeditated plan to try to subvert the democratic will of the American people. And hey, if you don't believe me, take a listen to what Senator Chuck Schumer had to say about all of this just a couple of months ago. Let it play.
There are those who believe that we are in real time living through an assault on the constitutional order. Do you believe that we are in a constitutional crisis right now?
Yes, our democracy is at risk because Donald Trump shows that he wishes to violate the laws in many, many different ways. The good news here is we did put 235 judges, progressive judges, judges not under the control of Trump last year on the bench, and they are ruling against Trump time after time after time.
And so, folks, there you have it straight from the horse's mouth. During Joe Biden's presidency, the Democrats spent years installing hyper-partisan activist judges all across the country for the sole and exclusive purpose of shutting down President Trump should he come back and win the 2024 election, which he did. And you want to know why they were so scared that he would come back and win the 2024 election? Well, it's because not only did he win the 2016 election, but as we all now know, he also won the 2020 election. The Democrats stole it. But so now, thank God, the Supreme Court has not only shut down all of these activist judges in the radically progressive federal judiciary, but they've also given President Trump 16 consecutive massive legal wins in the Supreme Court. And on top of all of that, in the next couple of months, the Supreme Court is actually going to be coming to some pretty massive decisions, for instance, like the constitutionality of birthright citizenship. But you know what? Take a listen to what none other than Stephen Miller recently had to say about all of this, really, this entire situation. Take a look.
And you go back to President Obama, President Bush, they're at 6, 12. President Trump in the first term is at 64. President Biden at 22, 40 so far in the second term. Here's what the Senate Minority Leader said, Chuck Schumer. This ruling hands Donald Trump yet another green light in his crusade to unravel the foundations of American democracy. His plan to end birthright citizenship is blatantly unconstitutional, but instead of stopping in its tracks, the court has instead ducked the question and bowed to an out-of-control executive branch. Respond, if you will, to Chuck Schumer and the issue of birthright citizenship.
Yes, well, look, Chuck Schumer is cheering for district court tyranny. Chuck Schumer doesn't want to win a national election. Chuck Schumer wants to be able to install a single district court judge in a far-left community to make decisions for the whole country. That is authoritarianism. That is fascism. That is not freedom. That is not American democracy. Let's talk about birthright citizenship. After the Civil War, Congress and America came together to ensure freedom for the children of slaves. Not the children of illegal aliens, the children of slaves. If you go to the UN today, the United Nations, you have diplomats from all over the world. None of their babies become automatic American citizens. Why? Because they're subject to the jurisdiction of a foreign country. Their allegiance is to a foreign country. Their citizenship is to a foreign country. Illegal aliens are no different, in fact worse, because illegal aliens are expressly forbidden from even being on our soil. Their allegiance is to a foreign land. They're under the jurisdiction of a foreign nation. Their children are not U.S. citizens, and the Supreme Court has now cleared the way for us to restore the actual meaning of the United States Constitution and the idea that this special privilege does not belong to illegal aliens and their children. I'll make one more point about democracy. Chuck Schumer and the Democrat Party presided over the invasion of this country, violating our immigration laws, violating our sovereignty, violating our Constitution. And now they're relying on a handful of district court judges to cement that invasion. Americans showed up at the polls in overwhelming numbers to repel that invasion, to put Donald Trump back in the White House.
And ladies and gentlemen, he is absolutely right about that. That is exactly what we did. But now, folks, to wrap all of this up, as I said earlier, let the record show that now that President Trump has scored a whopping 16 consecutive victories in the U.S. Supreme Court, and now that we know for a fact that the Democrats were deliberately weaponizing the legal system, we can all confidently say that not only has President Trump been totally vindicated, but also that the Democrats are really just hell-bent on destroying our entire country and completely tearing apart our entire republic. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with all of that being said, I think we can all be happy that as things currently stand, now that President Trump is back in the White House, we are finally putting America first.